Winter, 1943. A small kitchen somewhere in the American Midwest. The windows are fogged from the cold outside. Ration coupons lie folded on the table, counted and recounted as if numbers might change by staring at them long enough. A woman stands by the stove, sleeves rolled up, watching steam escape from a dented metal pot. Inside, there isn't much. Tough cuts of meat, dried beans that normally take all day, vegetables grown thin from exhausted soil, food that in another time might have been ignored. She locks the lid, turns the heat down, then waits. There is no sense of invention here, no excitement, no belief that anything remarkable is about to happen. The pot does not glow, it does not hum, it does not promise speed or comfort. It only sits there, heavy, sealed, quietly resisting the chaos of a world at war. Outside this kitchen, trains carry soldiers east and west. Factories burn through energy meant for homes. Time itself feels rationed. And yet, in this room, something ordinary is happening faster than it should. Not because it is clever, but because it refuses to waste anything.
If you saw it in a store in 1943, you would probably walk past. It was not elegant, not shiny, not designed to impress anyone. The metal was thick, sometimes uneven. The lid locked with an awkward mechanism that looked more industrial than domestic. No curves meant to please the eye, no promise of comfort, just weight, pressure, and silence. Many people distrusted it. It looked dangerous, too tight, too sealed. Something about trapping heat felt wrong, almost violent in a time when explosions filled the newsreels. Some called it unnecessary, others called it reckless. A few even called it un-American because it did not fit the image of abundance the country wanted to believe in. After all, why seal food away? Why force time to bend? Why cook like you're afraid of losing heat? Because that was exactly the point. This object was not built for beauty or pride. It was built for conditions no one wanted to admit existed. Conditions where fuel was scarce, where hours mattered, where meals could not afford to fail. It didn't care about appearances. It didn't adapt to the kitchen. The kitchen adapted to it. It reduced cooking to its most brutal logic. Less air, less loss, less waiting. In a nation trained to celebrate bigger, faster, brighter solutions, this thing offered the opposite. Not progress, constraint. And in 1943, constraint wasn't a flaw. It was survival.
By 1943, the United States was producing more than any nation on Earth, but consuming less at home than ever before. Coal, gas, and electricity were redirected to factories that never slept. Steel went to ships. Fuel went to planes. Trains ran on tight schedules, carrying war instead of comfort. What remained for civilians was what was left. The government called it rationing. Families felt it as absence. Less fuel for stoves, less time between shifts, less tolerance for waste. Cooking, once routine, became a daily calculation, not just what to eat, but whether it was worth the energy to cook it at all. Tough food demanded long hours of heat. Long hours meant fuel. Fuel meant coupons. Coupons meant sacrifice somewhere else. The standard solutions failed quietly. Slow cooking wasted heat. High flames burned fuel too fast. Eating raw or undercooked food brought illness, something a workforce at war could not afford. The problem was brutally simple to explain. How do you turn cheap, stubborn food into safe, nourishing meals using less fuel, less time, and less room for error? And the answer was almost impossible. You could not invent new power plants overnight. You could not shorten the day. You could not make bad food magically tender. Every option asked for something the country no longer had, except one thing: pressure. Not political pressure, physical pressure. A way to trap what little heat you had and force it to work harder, faster, without escaping into the air. This wasn't about luxury or innovation. It was about closing a system so tightly that nothing leaked. Not energy, not moisture, not time. In 1943 America, survival didn't require more resources. It required refusing to let the existing ones disappear. And that is where this unremarkable object stopped being a kitchen tool and became a solution no policy could legislate.
At its core, this object did not try to be smart. It removed things. No open flame licking the air, no heat drifting away into the kitchen, no waiting for water to slowly give up its energy. By sealing itself shut, it changed one simple rule of cooking. Heat was no longer allowed to escape. Inside, pressure built naturally, not violently, inevitably. As pressure rose, water stopped behaving the way people expected. It stayed liquid at higher temperatures. That meant food cooked faster, without burning fuel faster. Modern kitchens would later solve this with electronics, sensors and programs, timers, displays, automatic shutoffs. But in 1943, complexity was a weakness. Every extra part could break. Every feature demanded materials. Every failure wasted fuel. So this device did the opposite of modern design. It stripped itself down. A thick pot, a sealed lid, a controlled release valve, not to optimize, but to prevent catastrophe. Compared to better solutions, it looked primitive. Ovens heated entire rooms just to warm a single meal. Slow cookers consumed hours of energy. Open pots lost heat with every minute. This thing asked a different question. What if nothing escaped? What if heat, moisture, and time were treated as limited resources, because they were? By removing access to the outside air, it removed unpredictability. The temperature stabilized. Cooking became repeatable, reliable. Not elegant, not gentle, but dependable. In war, dependability beats brilliance. This wasn't about making food better. It was about making failure impossible. And the cost of that reliability was simple. You gave up visibility. You gave up control. You trusted the system because it had nothing left to waste.
No announcements were made. There were no posters explaining it, no speeches praising its contribution to the war effort. It did not appear in victory parades or newsreels. Most families never spoke about it at all. They just kept using it. In small kitchens, people noticed the change quietly. Meals that once demanded half a day now finished before exhaustion set in. Beans softened, meat surrendered, soups thickened without constant attention. The stove burned for less time. Fuel coupons stretched further. Evenings regained a few minutes of rest. This mattered more than it sounded. Shorter cooking meant less stress, less watching, less fear of wasting a meal that could not be replaced. In a world trained to accept scarcity, reliability became emotional relief. People trusted it because it did not surprise them. It did the same thing every time. It failed rarely, and when it did, it failed loudly, not silently. That predictability reshaped behavior. Families planned meals around it. Shift workers timed dinners with it. Mothers left the kitchen without hovering. Fathers returned from factories to food that was already done. And no one called this progress. There was no pride in owning it, no brand loyalty, no sense of modernity. It was passed along, borrowed, inherited, or left behind when families moved. Its spread was almost invisible. One neighbor mentioned saving fuel. Another noticed time returned. Someone else simply copied what worked. It did not change history in textbooks. It changed survival in ordinary days. Other technologies promised transformation. Radios inspired morale. Cars symbolized freedom. Appliances advertised ease and status. This did none of that. It offered silence. silence in the kitchen, silence in the budget, silence in the mind. And during wartime, silence meant stability. People didn't thank it, they didn't name it as essential, but they depended on it, not for comfort, but for continuity. Because when everything else felt uncertain, one small sealed system behaved exactly as expected. And that kind of trust does not make headlines. It simply keeps people fed.
Other nations faced the same problem: limited fuel, limited food, limited time. But their solutions reflected different constraints. In Britain, communal kitchens and shared meals became common. Large batches reduced waste but demanded coordination, transport, and centralized control. When systems worked, they fed many. When they failed publicly. In parts of Europe, especially under occupation, people relied on improvised stoves and open fires. These required constant attention and consumed whatever fuel could be found. Heat escaped freely. Efficiency depended on vigilance, not design. Germany invested heavily in industrial-scale ration kitchens and substitute foods. The system was structured, regulated, and rigid. It fed populations, but left little room for household flexibility. The Soviet Union leaned on sheer endurance. Long cooking times, shared heat sources, and communal preparation were common. The method worked, but at enormous physical cost. Compared to these, the American approach was quieter. Instead of centralizing cooking, it optimized the household. Instead of enforcing uniform solutions, it allowed individual kitchens to adapt. This object did not replace policy. It did not restructure society. It simply made the home more efficient. That difference mattered. Centralized systems collapse when coordination breaks. Improvised systems collapse when fuel disappears. Endurance-based systems collapse when people do. A sealed, self-contained solution avoided all three failures. It asked nothing from infrastructure. It required no supervision. It functioned the same in isolation as it did in abundance. Not better in theory, but better in practice. In wartime, practicality outlives ideology, and that is why this uncelebrated device found its place not in factories or mess halls, but on ordinary stoves, solving the same problem quietly, again and again.
History remembers noise. It remembers engines, explosions, speeches, and machines large enough to change skylines. It remembers what moved fast and looked impressive. But survival often depends on the opposite. The things that save people rarely announce themselves. They don't inspire pride. They don't promise progress. They simply refuse to fail. This object did not win the war. It did not reshape the economy. It did not appear in photographs. It stayed in kitchens. It stayed closed. It stayed reliable. While strategy shifted and supplies tightened, it asked only one question: how do we waste less today than yesterday? And it answered without drama. In 1943, that was enough. Because when resources disappear, elegance becomes irrelevant. When time runs short, complexity turns dangerous. And when survival is the goal, beauty is optional. What matters is function, not innovation, not recognition, just a system that works every time you need it. The tools that carry humanity through its hardest moments are rarely admired, they are trusted. And trust, in the end, feeds more people than glory ever could.